Chapter 1. The First Face. There's a Zodiac sign everyone thinks they know. That upbeat friend, always smiling, ready for the next adventure. But what if I told you that behind that smile exists something few dare to reveal? Something so intense it can either lift you to the heavens or drag you into an abyss with no return. Sagittarius has two faces. And the second one, well, the second one can surprise you in ways you never imagined. Stay with me until the end of this video because you're about to discover secrets about Sagittarius that even Sagittarians themselves won't admit out loud. And I guarantee, after this, you'll never look at this sign the same way again. The first face, the magnetic explorer. Think of that person who walks into any room and automatically everyone feels something different in the air. The energy shifts. The environment comes alive. It's as if an electric current runs through the space. The smile is wide, genuine, contagious. Their eyes shine with that kind of intensity only someone truly alive can have. And there's a presence, almost impossible to ignore. An invisible force that seems to whisper, "Come with me. The world you know is just a fraction of what really exists." This is Sagittarius in their most luminous face, the born explorer, the horizon hunter, the eternal seeker of absolute truth. But what makes this sign so special? What gives Sagittarius this almost supernatural ability to transform any moment into something memorable? The answer is in the stars. Literally, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the giant of planets, the king of expansion, abundance, unshakable faith, and infinite knowledge. Jupiter knows no limits. Jupiter accepts no smallness. And it's exactly this colossal force that pulses in the heart of every Sagittarian. That's why those born under this sign carry within them a flame that never goes out. No matter how many storms they face, how many falls they suffer, how many doors close, the flame keeps burning, vibrating, demanding more. It's the visceral need to grow, to learn, to live with such intensity that each day feels like an entire lifetime. Sagittarius is that friend who pulls you out of your comfort zone without even asking permission. They're the counselor who throws truths in your face that you've been avoiding for years. They're the person who simply won't allow life to become monotonous, predictable, too small. When Sagittarius is in the room, nothing stays the same. Conversations get deeper, laughter gets louder, plans become more ambitious. It's impossible to stay still near an authentic Sagittarian. They move you, shake you, challenge you to be bigger than you thought you could be. And this first face is absolutely captivating. Sagittarius believes in the impossible with the conviction of someone who has already witnessed miracles. They tear down walls that seemed eternal. They cross deserts others considered impassable. And when they reach the other side, they don't keep the discovery to themselves. No, they come back, take your hand and say, "You can do it too. I'll show you the way." This is the Sagittarius who inspires personal revolutions, who changes lives with a single phrase, who transforms ordinary existence into an epic journey, worthy of being remembered forever. But here comes the question that changes everything. Is that all there is? Could it be that this intense brightness, this blinding light, this consuming energy, doesn't hide anything else? Or is there a second face that few have the courage to face? Because if the first face is pure light, endless expansion, contagious joy, the other is wildfire, uncontrollable, and potentially destructive. And it's exactly this shadow side, this fire that burns without asking permission, that most people prefer not to see in Sagittarius. But you're going to meet it, because the complete truth about this sign lies precisely in the duality. And when you understand both faces of the archer, everything will make sense. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the uncontrollable fire of Sagittarius, that force that can either build empires or reduce everything to ashes. And believe me, what you're about to discover will shake everything you thought you knew about this sign. Chapter 2. The Uncontrollable Fire. The Truth Hunter. Sagittarius is like an arrow in full flight, fast, precise, cutting through the air with an accuracy that impresses anyone watching. When it hits the target, it's pure perfection. But now tell me something. What happens when that arrow misses? What happens when all that force, all that speed, all that determination goes in the wrong direction? That's when Sagittarius's energy stops being inspiration and transforms into destruction. The archer's second face isn't just dark, it's chaotic, unpredictable, and frighteningly powerful, because Sagittarius carries fire. Not that controlled fire of a candle that gently illuminates. No, we're talking about a wildfire. That kind of flame that devours everything in its path, without asking permission, without looking back, without measuring consequences. And when this fire loses control, when Sagittarius feels their freedom is being threatened, their wings are being clipped, that someone or some situation is trying to imprison them, that's when they become dangerous. Dangerous to others, and especially dangerous to themselves. Sagittarius hates chains, detests rules, despises limitations. And when these things appear, they don't just question them, they destroy them. With silent fury or sudden explosion, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. Everything that represented some kind of prison turns to ashes. And here's the problem. Sometimes what Sagittarius sees as prison is actually commitment. It's responsibility. It's love. But in the distorted vision of the archer in flames, all of this becomes chains, and chains need to be broken. This is when relationships are destroyed, projects are abandoned, opportunities are wasted, all in the name of a freedom that often is just disguised escape. The second face of Sagittarius reveals a restless spirit that can't sit still, that doesn't accept ready-made answers, that questions even what should be sacred. And when this restlessness transforms into impatience, into arrogance, into rebellion without purpose, they become an emotional tornado, capable of dragging along everything and everyone nearby. And the most disturbing part? Sagittarius doesn't always notice the damage they're causing. To them, they're just being authentic, just defending their essence, just fighting for the right to exist without chains. But while they fight for this abstract freedom, real people get hurt. Shared dreams are shattered. Bonds that took years to build break in seconds. Because Sagittarius's fire doesn't choose what to burn. It simply burns. This obscure face is driven by excess. Sagittarius doesn't do anything halfway. Neither the good nor the bad. They talk too much and often say things that should have stayed unspoken. They promise the world without calculating if they can deliver. They dive headfirst into adventures without thinking about consequences. They live on the edge, and when the edge is crossed, chaos settles in. Many look at Sagittarius and only see the fun, optimistic, inspiring side. But few notice the invisible weight this sign carries. Few understand that behind that loud laughter exists a constant battle, a struggle between wanting to embrace the entire world and wanting to run from it at the same time. And it's in this tension that danger lives, because Sagittarius can be merciless, especially with words. They shoot truths as if they were poisoned arrows, without filter, without mercy, without considering the emotional impact it might have. To them, honesty is the supreme virtue, but for those on the receiving end, often it's a stab wound. And here's the cruel irony. The same Sagittarius who helps you fly can be responsible for clipping your wings. The same one who shows you infinite horizons can push you off a cliff. The same one who inspires you to be free can imprison you in doubts and insecurities. Because Sagittarius knows no middle ground. They're all or nothing. They can be an enlightened guide who transforms your life, or a lost wanderer who drags you into the abyss with them. The big question is, how do you know which face you're meeting? The hunter of truths and lies, the deepest essence of Sagittarius, is the relentless search for truth. Not just any superficial truth, not those half-truths we tell ourselves. No, Sagittarius seeks the truth, absolute, raw, liberating. And this search is beautiful when balanced. But what happens when this search becomes obsession? What happens when Sagittarius starts believing that only they have access to the real truth? That's when the second face manifests in its most dangerous form. The archer transforms into an arrogant preacher, into a relentless judge, into someone who not only seeks truth, but believes they own it. Sagittarius hates hypocrisy, hates fakeness, hates social masks, and that's admirable. But in their shadow version, they become exactly what they criticize. They become the hypocrite who preaches freedom, but imprisons others in their own beliefs. They become the false prophet who speaks of truth, but manipulates narratives to serve their own interests. They become the mask they so despise, only they can't see it in the mirror. When Sagittarius loses balance, they confuse truth with opinion. They confuse wisdom with arrogance. They confuse guiding with controlling. And it's at this point that they become intolerant, unable to accept different perspectives, unable to admit they might be wrong, unable to see that truth has many faces, not just the one they chose to defend. The unbalanced Sagittarian believes they have all the answers, believes their worldview is the only correct one. And when someone dares to disagree, when someone questions their certainties, they don't discuss, they attack, with sharp words, with cruel judgments, with an almost sick need to prove they're right and the other is completely wrong. And the scariest part is that Sagittarius knows exactly how to use words. They're masters of rhetoric. They know where to press to hurt. They know which weaknesses to exploit. They know how to build arguments that seem irrefutable. So they wear the mask of the wise one, the enlightened, the one who sees beyond. But behind this mask can exist an inflamed ego, hungry for validation, desperate to prove their worth through supposed intellectual or spiritual superiority. And when this ego is challenged, when someone dares not to bow before their truth, then the explosion is inevitable. Sagittarius in their shadow face can become a subtle manipulator. They don't manipulate like water signs, through emotions. They don't manipulate like earth signs, through practical resources. They manipulate through speeches, through ideas, through building narratives that benefit only them. They convince you they're liberating you when actually they're imprisoning you in their worldview. They convince you they're showing you the truth when actually they're just projecting their own shadows. And the worst part? They do this genuinely believing they're helping, because in their mind, their truth is so absolute, so unquestionable, that anyone who doesn't accept it is simply lost, blind, imprisoned by ignorance. This is Sagittarius's most dangerous face, not the explosive anger, not the sudden coldness, but the arrogance disguised as wisdom. If in their luminous face, Sagittarius is the torch that illuminates the path for the lost, in their shadow face, they can be the deceiving light that leads you straight to a cliff. Like those ancient stories of travelers who follow a light in the darkness, thinking it's salvation, but it's actually just an abyss waiting. And the question that remains is terrible. How do you recognize when Sagittarius is truly guiding you to the truth, and when they're just dragging you into the abyss with them? How do you differentiate the authentic sage from the deceived preacher? How do you trust the archer's arrow when you don't know if it will free you or pierce through you? In the next chapter, we'll dive into the devastating consequences of this duality. We'll understand how this obsessive search for truth can destroy relationships, careers, and even the very essence of those who live with Sagittarius. Because now you already know both faces, but you still haven't seen what happens when they collide. Chapter 3. The Consequences of Duality. Pla the Weakness Hunter. There's a decisive moment in the life of anyone who gets deeply involved with Sagittarius. A turning point where everything becomes crystal clear. It's when you realize the arrow can hit or get lost in the air. And the consequences of this duality, they're as intense as the sign itself. When Sagittarius's arrow hits the target, the impact is transformative. Everyone around benefits. The energy spreads like a positive virus out of control. Dreams stop being impossible and become concrete plans. Courage stops being an abstract word and becomes real action. Sagittarius opens doors you didn't even know existed, shows you paths your fear kept invisible, gently pushes you out of your comfort zone and teaches you that, on the other side, exists life, exists growth, exists a better version of you, waiting to be born. When balanced, Sagittarius is the catalyst your existence was missing. But what about when this arrow gets lost? When the second face predominates? Then the consequences can be devastating, because the same fire that warms can burn, the same light that guides can blind, the same force that builds can destroy. And the cruelest part, often those close don't see the change coming. One day you have by your side the inspiring explorer, the one who makes you believe anything is possible. The next day, the shadow archer appears, cold, distant, almost unrecognizable, and you're left there, confused, trying to understand what happened, what you did wrong, why the person who loved you, supported you, understood you, suddenly became a stranger. But the truth is, you did nothing wrong. Sagittarius simply felt their chains, and when that happens, the escape is instinctive, immediate, without explanations. The consequences for those left behind are profound, because it's not just losing someone's physical presence, it's losing the energy, the motivation, that spark Sagittarius brought to your life. It's like someone suddenly turning off the lights and you're left fumbling in the dark, searching for something that's no longer there. Relationships can be destroyed overnight, not necessarily with explosive fights. Sometimes it's worse. It's the silent withdrawal. It's the Sagittarian who simply stops responding, stops showing up, stops caring. And when you finally get an explanation, it comes in the form of a precise arrow. I need space. I can't be what you need. I can't stay trapped. Trapped. That word sums up everything. For Sagittarius, any form of deep commitment can feel like prison, and they can't live like that. So, they run, and in the process, leave a trail of confused hearts, undone plans, shared dreams that now need to be buried. The most fascinating and disturbing thing is that Sagittarius doesn't always notice the damage they cause. In their view, they're just being honest, just respecting their nature, just prioritizing their freedom, and freedom, to them, is sacred, more important than promises, more important than expectations, more important sometimes, even than people. This brutal honesty, which in small doses can be refreshing, when it becomes a pattern, turns into a lethal weapon, because Sagittarius doesn't measure words. They say what they think, when they think it, without filters, without considering if it will hurt, if it will leave marks, if it will destroy something that took months or years to build. To them, truth is more important than diplomacy. Authenticity is more important than tact. And this prioritization has a cost. The cost is the wounds that remain, the emotional scars that take time to heal, the insecurities that settle in. Those who live intimately with an unbalanced Sagittarian learn to walk on eggshells, never know when they'll receive a verbal arrow, never know when the mood will change, never know if they can make long-term plans or if everything will crumble the next minute. And here's the cruel paradox. To have Sagittarius around, you need to be prepared to lose them at any moment, because they only stay where they feel free, and freedom, to them, is always an open door, a possibility to leave whenever they want, without explanations, without guilt, without looking back. This creates a toxic dynamic in relationships. The other person remains eternally insecure, trying to be interesting enough to keep Sagittarius around, but without being too intense to scare them away. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it escapes. And the consequences of this: constant anxiety, fear of abandonment, feeling of never being enough. But it's not just romantic relationships that suffer. Friendships can also be destroyed. That Sagittarian friend who was always present suddenly disappears, not because you did something wrong, but because they found a new adventure, a new interest, a new group that sparks more of their curiosity at the moment. And when they return, months later, they act as if nothing happened, as if they hadn't simply vanished from your life without warning. For them, it's natural. For you, It's disconcerting. In the professional environment, the consequences are also evident. Sagittarius can be the most creative, most innovative, most inspiring employee on the team. But if they feel the environment is getting too monotonous, if they notice the rules are tightening, if they start feeling stagnant, they quit. Or simply stop caring, doing the bare minimum, until finding the next opportunity. Projects can be abandoned midway, commitments can be broken, partnerships can be dissolved, all because Sagittarius felt it no longer made sense to them. And when something loses meaning in a Sagittarian's mind, there's no logical argument, emotional appeal, or moral obligation that will make them continue. They simply leave. And it's in this repetitive pattern of grand arrivals and abrupt departures that the consequences of duality become most evident. Because Sagittarius isn't just a sign with two faces. It's a sign that lives in constant tension between them. Between staying and going. Between building and destroying. Between loving deeply and disappearing completely. And those by their side need immense emotional strength to handle this roller coaster. Because the truth is this: living with Sagittarius means accepting they'll never be completely yours, that they'll always have one foot out the door, that they'll always be looking at the horizon, wondering what exists beyond. And perhaps this is the deepest consequence of all. Not what Sagittarius does, but what they represent: the impossibility of control, of predictability, of absolute emotional security. But there's something even darker we need to explore, something few notice until it's too late. The hunter of truth and weaknesses. When Sagittarius's arrow transforms into a weapon, it doesn't just aim at the outside world. It aims at you, your weak points, your contradictions, your most hidden shadows. Because the hunter archetype in Sagittarius goes far beyond intellectual curiosity or the desire for adventure. They're a merciless observer. Nothing escapes their emotional and psychological radar. Lies? They notice before you finish the sentence. Weaknesses? They identify them with surgical precision. Self-destructive patterns? They see them all and will point them out without mercy. And here's the fascinating and terrifying part at the same time. Sagittarius has an almost supernatural ability to see through people, to read between the lines, to notice what you're hiding from yourself. They see your social masks and completely ignore them, speaking directly to the raw version of who you are. And this can be liberating or devastating. For those who are close, this brutal honesty can function as a mirror, reflecting not who you pretend to be, but who you really are, including the parts you've spent your whole life avoiding looking at. A Sagittarian friend can point out with total naturalness that behavior you've been repeating for years that's destroying your chances of happiness. They won't wrap it in soft words, won't prepare the emotional ground. They'll simply throw the truth in your face like throwing cold water. You realize you always choose people who don't value you, right? You do this every time things are going well. You sabotage yourself. You're scared. And you're letting fear control your life. And you're left there, paralyzed. Because it's true. You know it's true. But nobody ever had the courage to say it out loud. Sagittarius did. And now you need to decide what to do with this information. Here enters the crucial point of duality. Sagittarius genuinely believes they're helping. To them, exposing uncomfortable truths is an act of love. It's their way of caring, of driving growth, of freeing the person from their own mental chains. But the problem is the intensity, the way, the timing. Because not everyone is ready to face their shadows. Not everyone asked for this kind of confrontation. And Sagittarius rarely worries about that. If they saw something that needs to be said, they'll say it, period. And the emotional consequences? To them, they're secondary, because truth is more important, always. This is where the second face manifests most strongly. The same Sagittarian who inspires you can become the relentless critic who points out every flaw, every inconsistency, every weakness you have. And they do it with disturbing calm. It's not anger. It's not malice. It's simply observation, like a scientist analyzing an experiment, like an archer studying the target before shooting. Imagine being in a relationship with someone like this, someone who sees all your insecurities, all your fears, all the times you lie to yourself, and who doesn't hesitate to point out each one. It can be transformative. It can force you to evolve in ways you never imagined. But it can also be destructive. It can break your self-esteem. It can make you feel exposed, vulnerable, eternally inadequate. Because living under Sagittarius's gaze is like living under a microscope. Nothing goes unnoticed, and everything will be commented on. The line between liberation and destruction is too thin, and few can walk it without falling to one side. In the next chapter, we'll dive even deeper. We'll understand how Sagittarius deals with their own shadows when they turn this critical eye inward. Because the truth is that Sagittarius's greatest conflict isn't with others. It's with themselves. And when you understand this internal battle, everything about this sign will make sense in a completely new way. Chapter 4. The Explorer's Shadows, plus the archetype of triumph and ruin. Until now, we've talked about how Sagittarius impacts the world around them, how their arrows hit other people, how their duality affects relationships, friendships, careers. But there's a territory few dare to explore, a dark place where even Sagittarius doesn't like to stay for long, their own internal shadows. Because here's the truth nobody tells. Sagittarius's greatest enemy isn't out there. It's in here, in the mirror. In the reflection they avoid looking at directly. Every explorer carries unexplored territories within themselves, and Sagittarius, ironically, spends their entire life seeking external truths while desperately running from internal truths. Inside every Sagittarian exists a paradox that never rests, a silent war that has no truce. On one side, the insatiable desire for freedom, expansion, constant movement. On the other, the paralyzing fear of failing, of committing, of discovering they might not be as special as they believe. This tension creates an emotional field so intense that it's often invisible to outside observers, because Sagittarius hides it well, very well, behind the wide smile, behind the contagious laughter, behind the adventure stories. But inside is chaos. It's a whirlwind of doubts they would never admit out loud. It's deep insecurity disguised as unshakable confidence. It's an existential void they try to fill with experiences, travels, conquests, knowledge. But it's never enough. Never. Because the truth Sagittarius fears most is this. What if this entire search for meaning is just escape? What if this need for freedom is just disguised fear? What if deep down, really deep down, they're more lost than anyone they've ever tried to guide? This possibility terrifies them. So they run. They shoot more arrows. They seek more horizons. They create more projects. They make more plans. Anything to not have to stop. Because stopping means looking inward. And looking inward means facing their shadows. And their shadows are terrifying. When balanced, Sagittarius can transform this internal conflict into fuel. They use the tension as an impulse to grow. They learn from mistakes. They recognize their limitations without diminishing themselves. They manage to be brutally honest with themselves the same way they are with others. And then, magic happens. They become truly wise, not the fake arrogant sage, but the authentic sage who has already crossed their own hell and returned with real lessons. This balanced Sagittarius is rare, precious, transformative. But when unbalanced, when shadows predominate, then internal chaos leaks out in destructive ways. Impatience becomes absolute intolerance. Confidence turns into blind arrogance. The search for truth transforms into cruel judgment. The need for freedom becomes pure selfishness. And worst of all, the restlessness that should be an engine for growth transforms into consuming anxiety that leaves nothing intact. Unbalanced Sagittarius can never be at peace. Never. They're always looking for the next thing, the next place, the next person, the next experience that will finally fill the void. But the void remains because the problem isn't out there. It's in here. This is when the moments of greatest risk emerge. When Sagittarius starts projecting their internal frustrations onto the external world. They blame others for feeling trapped when actually they're imprisoned by their own fears. They criticize people for not being authentic when actually they're using masks to hide from themselves. They flee from commitments not because they value freedom, but because they're terrified of being vulnerable enough to truly surrender. The arrow of truth, which was once liberating, becomes merciless judgment, first of others, then, inevitably, of themselves. The contagious enthusiasm transforms into suffocating pressure. They demand from themselves and others an impossible perfection, constant evolution, growth that never stops. And when they can't reach these unrealistic standards, the self-criticism is devastating. Why can't I just stay? Why does nothing seem enough? Why do I ruin everything good in my life? These questions echo in the shadowy Sagittarian's mind, but they rarely have the courage to answer them honestly, because the answers would require admitting weakness. And Sagittarius was taught that weakness is unacceptable, so they push these questions under the emotional carpet and keep running, keep seeking, keep fleeing. But there's something fascinating about this whole process, something few notice. Sagittarius has a unique capacity to confront their shadows when they finally decide to stop running. Few signs have this raw courage, this willingness to dive into their own abyss without guarantee they'll be able to return. But Sagittarius does when they're ready. They don't flee from discomfort when they decide to face it. On the contrary, they dive headfirst, go all the way down, face their demons with the same intensity they face everything in life. And when they do this, when they truly look at their shadows without looking away, a profound transformation happens. They discover truths about themselves that no one else could have revealed. They find an authenticity that goes beyond superficial frankness. They develop a wisdom that can only be born from real confrontation with their own darkness. It's this complexity that makes Sagittarius both irresistible and impossible, both inspiring and frightening, both savior and destroyer. Because duality isn't just an interesting characteristic, it's the essence. It's what defines the sign in its totality. Every arrow shot, every brutal criticism, every profound insight, every bold adventure, every sudden withdrawal, every unexpected return, all of this is a reflection of a constant battle, a war between light and shadow, between freedom and responsibility, between the desire for deep connection and the terror of being truly known. And those who live with Sagittarius need to understand this, need to accept that the person by their side isn't simple, isn't predictable, isn't safe in the traditional sense. They're complex, they're intense, they're real, and perhaps that's exactly what makes them so magnetic. Because in a world full of masks and falsehoods, Sagittarius is genuinely themselves, for better and for worse, in light and in shadow, the archetype of triumph and ruin. We now arrive at the point where everything converges, where Sagittarius's duality reaches its apex, where light and shadow collide with a force that can create or destroy entire worlds. Because Sagittarius doesn't exist in the middle ground. They're extreme by nature, intense by essence, absolute in everything they do. And this means they can become two completely opposite things, the archetype of triumph or the archetype of ruin. When Sagittarius manages to balance their two faces, when they learn to dance between light and shadow without getting lost in either, they become almost mythical. They're the person everyone wants around, the mentor who transforms lives, the friend who makes you believe in the impossible, the partner who teaches you what real freedom is within deep commitment. Their enthusiasm is no longer just scattered energy, it's directed force. Their knowledge is no longer just accumulated information, it's genuine wisdom. Their honesty is no longer a weapon, it's medicine. They become the enlightened explorer, the one who has already crossed deserts, climbed mountains, navigated stormy oceans, and returned with maps to help others make the same journey. Their scars are no longer hidden weaknesses. They're medals displayed with pride, proof of battles won, evidence that it's possible to fall and rise stronger. This Sagittarius inspires not because they pretend to be perfect, but because they're authentically imperfect. They don't deny their shadows. They integrate them, accept them, transform them into part of their light. And when someone like this enters your life, everything changes. Relationships become shared adventures instead of disguised prisons. Careers stop being obligations and become missions with purpose. Friendships deepen because there's space for truth, for growth, for radical authenticity. Balanced Sagittarius doesn't trap you, but they also don't abandon you. They walk beside you, give you space when you need it, pull you forward when you're paralyzed by fear, challenge you when you're settling, hold you when you're broken. They understand that real freedom isn't absence of bonds. It's conscious presence. It's a choice, renewed every day. And when they choose to stay, when they choose to commit, it's not because they need to, it's because they want to. And that difference changes everything. This is the archetype of triumph, the Sagittarius who conquered themselves before trying to guide anyone else. But when shadow predominates, when Sagittarius gets lost in their own darkness, then emerges the archetype of ruin, and there's nothing more destructive than a completely unbalanced Sagittarian, because all that potential for transformation inverts. The energy that could build empires becomes the force that topples them. The light that could guide multitudes becomes the fire that consumes everything. Sagittarius in ruin is like an emotional tornado. They devastate everything in their path. Relationships, careers, friendships, dreams, projects, nothing survives unscathed. And the worst part, they do this while believing they're being liberating, that they're being authentic, that they're just defending their essence. Honesty transforms into calculated cruelty. The search for truth becomes a witch hunt. The need for freedom becomes destructive selfishness that considers no one but themselves. They become the false prophet who drags followers into the abyss, the charismatic leader who inspires loyalty only to betray it at the critical moment, the friend who knows all your secrets and uses each one against you when they decide you're no longer useful. Sagittarius, in ruin, is dangerous because they still maintain all the charisma, all the power of persuasion, all that magnetic energy that makes people want to follow them. But now this magnetism serves the shadow, and shadow doesn't build. It only destroys. They'll point out your weaknesses not to help you overcome them, but to keep you small while they feel big. They'll share truths that are really just projections of their own unhealed wounds. They'll promise worlds but deliver only disillusions. They'll make you believe you need them when actually they're preventing you from flying with your own wings. And when you finally see the game, when you finally see the manipulation behind the supposed wisdom, they're already gone, already found the next person to seduce with false promises of freedom and truth, leaving you to pick up the pieces alone. This is the archetype of ruin, the darkest side Sagittarius can reach. And the line between these two extremes, between triumph and ruin, it's thinner than you imagine. In the next chapter, we'll reveal what really determines which side Sagittarius will lean toward. We'll unveil the secret that very few people know, what really moves this sign at the deepest level of the soul. And when you know this, you'll understand everything. Absolutely everything about Sagittarius. Chapter 5. The Arrow's Secret, plus Duality in Relationships. To truly understand Sagittarius at their deepest essence, we need to go beyond the sharp words, beyond the adventurous spirit, beyond even the duality we've already explored. We need to look at the core, at what makes the arrow shoot with such force, and at what explains why sometimes it gets completely lost in the air. The true key lies in Sagittarius's internal motivation, and this motivation can be summed up in a single word, meaning. Sagittarius doesn't live just for freedom, doesn't live just for adventure, doesn't live just for knowledge. Sagittarius lives for the desperate search to give meaning to existence. Each trip they take isn't just about seeing new places. It's about finding meaning. Each intense debate isn't just about being right. It's about discovering truths that make life worthwhile. Each relationship they start isn't just about connection. It's about finding someone who shares this tireless search for purpose. This need for meaning is so deep, it moves every decision, every word, every action. And when Sagittarius finds meaning, when they feel they're on a path that truly matters, then their arrow is absolutely precise. Nothing deviates them. Nothing stops them. They become an unstoppable force of nature. In this state, Sagittarius becomes visionary. They see invisible connections, notice patterns others ignore, understand the bigger picture when everyone around is stuck in details. They believe with unshakable faith that there's always something beyond what eyes can see, that there's always more to discover, more to learn, more to experience. This belief isn't naive, it's profound, it's visceral. It's what makes Sagittarius wake up every day with that incomparable energy. When guided by a greater meaning, Sagittarius becomes dedicated in ways that surprise even those who know them well. They who seem so inconstant suddenly show iron loyalty. They who seem so scattered suddenly show laser focus because they found what they were looking for, found something that truly matters. And when this happens, their energy transforms everything around. They no longer inspire just with words. They inspire with actions, with results, with a presence that makes it clear. It's possible to live with purpose. It's possible to make a difference. It's possible to transform impossible dreams into concrete reality. This is Sagittarius at their highest state, moved not by ego, not by external validation, but by a greater meaning that transcends the individual. But what about when Sagittarius loses this meaning? When the search becomes empty? When horizons stop meaning something? Then the second face emerges with devastating force. Because Sagittarius without purpose is like a ship without a compass. They keep moving, but where to? They keep shooting arrows, but aiming at what? It's in this existential void that danger lives. Sagittarius who lost meaning becomes the wandering archer, the one who shoots random arrows just to feel they're doing something, anything, because stopping means confronting the void, and the void is unbearable. So they get lost in empty criticisms, in judgments that lead nowhere, in superficial adventures that promise emotion but deliver only temporary distraction, in destructive impulses they mask as search for freedom, but that are really just escape from themselves. Restlessness becomes pathological. They can't stay still for even a second, always need the next stimulus, the next novelty, the next drama, the next conflict that at least makes them feel alive, even if it's a life without direction, without purpose, without real meaning. And here's the revelation that changes everything. Sagittarius's arrow doesn't miss due to lack of skill. It misses due to lack of purpose. When there's a clear target, when there's deep meaning guiding the shot, Sagittarius never fails. They're precise, they're accurate, they're transformative. But when they shoot just to shoot, when they move just to move, when they search just to search, without really knowing what or why, then chaos settles in, and everyone around feels the impact. This understanding completely changes how you see Sagittarius, because now you understand that duality isn't a question of good or bad character. It's a question of direction. Sagittarius with meaning is pure light. Sagittarius without meaning is silent destruction. And the question that remains is, what gives Sagittarius meaning? It's not money. It's not status. It's not material comfort. It's the feeling of evolving, of growing, of approaching some greater truth, of contributing to something beyond themselves. When Sagittarius feels they're stagnant, repeating themselves, just existing without really living, that's when the escape begins. That's why they abandon relationships that seem perfect from the outside, because inside they became too predictable, too safe, without space for expansion. That's why they leave well-paid jobs without looking back, because money doesn't compensate for the feeling of dying a little each day, doing something meaningless. That's why they distance themselves from friends of years, because the connection lost depth, became routine, stopped stimulating growth. It's not meanness, it's not coldness, it's desperation for meaning. And when you understand this, everything about Sagittarius makes sense in a completely new way. Now let's see how this search for meaning manifests in the most intimate relationships. In love, in friendship, in work. Because it's in relationships that Sagittarius's duality becomes most visible, most intense, and most transformative. Duality in relationships, love, friendship, and work. Until now, you've understood Sagittarius's essence, what moves them, what defines them, what explains their extremes. But how does all this translate to daily life? How does this insatiable search for meaning impact those who are close? Let's dive into the three main spheres of life where Sagittarian duality manifests most strongly. In love. Loving a Sagittarius is one of the most intense experiences someone can have when they're present, truly present. It's absolutely fascinating. They bring an energy that makes you feel you're truly living, not just existing, living. The gestures are grand, not necessarily expensive, but meaningful. They don't buy flowers because it's an obligation. They show up at 3 a.m. with tickets to a place you've always dreamed of visiting. The conversations are deep. They don't just want to know how your day was. They want to know your deepest fears, your most impossible dreams, the truths you've never said out loud. The passion is real, intense, overwhelming. When Sagittarius loves, they love with everything. With body, mind, soul. They surrender completely, and for some moments, you believe you found the perfect person, but there's always this but with Sagittarius, because the moment they feel freedom is being threatened, everything changes. It doesn't need to be something obvious. It doesn't need to be a real attempt at control. Sometimes it's just the natural expectation of a relationship, wanting to spend more time together, making future plans, building something solid. For most people, this is love deepening. For Sagittarius, it can be felt as chains closing. And when this happens, the shadow side emerges. They distance themselves, emotionally first, physically later. Messages become more spaced, meetings less frequent. The energy that was once warm is now cold. And you're left confused. What happened? What did you do? Why does the person who swore you were special now act like you're just another one? The truth is, you did nothing wrong. Sagittarius simply felt the weight, and when they feel weight, they flee. The verbal arrows start appearing too. That honesty that was once refreshing now hurts. They point out your insecurities, your fears, your contradictions, not to help you grow, but almost as if creating distance purposefully, as if pushing you away before you notice they're already gone. And then comes the inevitable conversation. I need space. It's not you. It's me. I can't give what you need. And they disappear, leaving you wondering if the love was real, if you imagined everything, if there's something wrong with you. But with time you understand. It wasn't about you. It never was. It was about them and their constant battle between wanting deep connection and being terrified of being truly known, of being truly seen, of being truly vulnerable. Loving Sagittarius is accepting they'll never be completely yours, that there will always be a part of them looking at the horizon, wondering what exists beyond. And the only way to have Sagittarius is not to try to have them. It's loving them with open hands. It's understanding they only stay where they feel free to leave. Paradoxical, totally. But it's the only truth when it comes to loving this sign. In friendship, Sagittarius's duality is also intense, but manifests differently. Sagittarius is that friend who pulls you out of your comfort zone without mercy, who makes you question everything you believe, who presents perspectives you'd never consider alone. They encourage you to risk, to dream bigger, to believe you can more than you think. Their words stay engraved in memory because they come from a place of absolute truth. When you're stuck in self-destructive patterns, they're the first to point it out, not with judgment, but with brutal clarity. You're doing it again, notice? They don't accept excuses. Don't buy your victimization narratives. They force you to look in the mirror and see the truth. And this, despite being painful, is incredibly valuable. But friendship with Sagittarius has a price. They can disappear for months without warning, not because they're angry, not because something happened, simply because they found a new adventure, a new group, a new interest that monopolized all their attention. And when they return, they act as if nothing happened, as if you talked yesterday. For them, it's natural. Friendship doesn't need constant presence. It needs true connection. And true connection doesn't die with distance. But for you, it can be confusing, frustrating, even hurtful. You learn you can't count on Sagittarius to always be present, but you can count on them to tell you truths no one else has the courage to say. Can't expect daily messages, but can expect conversations that change your life perspective. Can't demand traditional loyalty, but can trust that when you truly need, when it truly matters, they'll be there. Friendship with Sagittarius teaches you there are different forms of love, of care, of presence, and that sometimes the person who's physically distant can be emotionally closer than those you see every day. At work, in the professional environment, Sagittarius is a force of nature. When motivated by the right meaning, they are the employee who brings innovative ideas, who questions rigid processes, who inspires the team to think bigger, to risk more, to not settle for mediocrity. As a leader, they can be transformative. They don't micromanage. They give autonomy, trust, empower, want each person to grow and develop their maximum potential. Their feedback is direct, but valuable. They don't waste time with detours. If there's something to say, they say it, and they're usually right. They see the bigger picture when everyone is stuck in details, have natural strategic vision, a capacity to anticipate trends that impresses. When engaged, there are no limits to what they can accomplish. But if the environment gets too monotonous, if rules become too rigid, if they feel there's no more room for growth, Sagittarius simply shuts down or leaves. They can't stand structures that suffocate creativity. Don't tolerate excessive bureaucracy. Don't accept doing things because it's always been this way. And when they decide to leave, there's no argument that will make them stay. Not salary increase, not promotion, not promises of change. Because it's not about money, it's about meaning. And when work loses meaning, Sagittarius can't pretend anymore. Projects can be abandoned midway. Partnerships dissolved without clear explanation. Commitments broken because something changed internally. For colleagues and bosses, this can be frustrating, unpredictable, even irresponsible. But for Sagittarius, it's simply being honest with themselves. They can't waste life doing something that doesn't matter. Can't sell their soul for financial security. They need purpose, meaning, to feel they're contributing to something greater. And when they find this, when they work on something that truly matters, there's no more dedicated employee, more creative, more committed. The key is understanding that Sagittarius isn't uncommitted. They're selectively committed. They don't commit to just anything. But when they commit to something that makes sense, it's until the end. And this is the biggest lesson about living with Sagittarius. In any context, don't try to trap them. Don't try to control them. Don't try to make them fit traditional molds. Give space, give freedom, give purpose. And you'll have by your side one of the most powerful, most inspiring, most transformative forces that exist. In the next and final chapter, we'll close with the final revelation, the definitive face of the archer, what very few can see, and what changes everything you thought you knew about Sagittarius. Final chapter, the archer's final face, plus closing after crossing through light and shadow, after exploring passion and coldness, after diving into courage and fear. After unveiling the deepest secrets of this sign, we arrive at the final moment, the definitive revelation, the face that very few people can see, the ultimate truth about Sagittarius that, when understood, changes absolutely everything. And this truth is both simple and devastatingly profound. Sagittarius isn't just a sign with two faces. Sagittarius is a path of extremes, of choices, of consequences. They can be the fire that warms your hands on a cold night, or the blaze that consumes everything you've built. They can be the arrow that frees you from invisible chains, or the blade that cuts exactly where you're most vulnerable. They can be the light that illuminates your path in the deepest darkness, or the deceiving light that leads you straight to the abyss. And you know what defines which of these faces will manifest? Meaning. It always comes back to this desperate search for purpose that defines every breath, every decision, every word of Sagittarius. When they find a greater purpose, when they understand their freedom doesn't need to be escape, but can be conscious expansion, when they realize truth isn't a weapon but medicine, they become unbeatable. Their energy doesn't just inspire, it transforms generations. Their vision doesn't just show horizons, it opens portals to realities that seemed impossible. Their honesty doesn't just expose truth, it awakens entire lives that were asleep. This is the enlightened explorer, the philosopher who crossed their own hell and returned with real wisdom, the adventurer who doesn't seek just passing thrills, but experiences that leave permanent legacies. When Sagittarius is in this state of grace, they're capable of extraordinary things. They can take someone completely lost and show the way back, not through empty sermons, but through living example, through a presence that proves it's possible to fall 1,000 times and still rise stronger. They can transform pain into wisdom, failure into lesson, fear into courage, because they've already done this with themselves. And when you make this journey internally, you can guide others through it. This balanced Sagittarius understands that duality isn't a burden, it's a gift. It's the ability to transit between light and shadow without getting lost in either. It's the wisdom of knowing when to use honesty as medicine and when silence is wiser. It's the mastery of being free without abandoning those you love. It's the rare art of living intensely without destroying everything in the process. And when you meet a Sagittarius like this, when you cross paths with someone who mastered their own duality, it's a blessing, pure and simple, because you're before someone who lived enough to understand that real freedom isn't absence of commitment. It's conscious presence. It's renewed choice. It's love that doesn't imprison but also doesn't abandon. But there's the other side, the side we can't ignore. When Sagittarius loses their way, when the search for meaning transforms into existential void, disguised as movement, when freedom becomes just fear of being known, then the second face completely dominates, and the archer becomes wandering, trapped in their own contradictions, using their frankness as a weapon to keep everyone at distance, using their freedom as an excuse to never truly surrender, using their energy as chaos that destroys instead of builds. This lost Sagittarius is like a drifting ship. They keep moving, but aren't going anywhere. Keep shooting arrows, but no longer know why. Keep searching, but forgot what they're looking for. And in the process, leave a trail of confused hearts, of shattered dreams, of people who believed in the light but got burned by the fire. Many see only destruction in this phase, but the truth is, there's still hope, because Sagittarius can always find their way back. This is perhaps their most powerful characteristic, the capacity to get completely lost and still find the way back, the courage to fall into the deepest abyss and have the strength to climb back. Because deep down, really deep down, Sagittarius's essence is to seek, and those who truly seek, sooner or later, find. Maybe they don't find what they were looking for. Maybe they find something completely different. But they find, always find. And it's exactly this journey, with all its falls and rises, with all its light and shadow, with all its beauty and destruction, that makes Sagittarius one of the most fascinating signs of the Zodiac, because they're not predictable, not safe, not easy, but they're real, authentic, alive. And this is the greatest lesson Sagittarius has to teach. Not the lesson about abstract freedom. Not the lesson about absolute truths. Not the lesson about infinite horizons. But the lesson about living intensely, even when it hurts. Loving deeply, even when it wounds. Making terrible mistakes, but always learning. Falling dramatically, but always rising while looking at the horizon. Sagittarius reminds us that life wasn't made to be lived with safety, with predictability, with fear of feeling too much, risking too much, being too much. Life was made to be an adventure, and adventures have risks, have dangers, have moments of pure joy, and moments of deep pain. But in the end, when you look back, what remains aren't the safe moments. They're the intense moments, the ones that made you feel alive, the ones that changed who you are. And Sagittarius lives eternally in these moments. They don't choose between light and shadow. They learn to walk with both. They don't flee from duality. They embrace it, because they understand that it's exactly in this tension between extremes that real life lives, the life worth living, the life that leaves marks, the life that matters. So, in the end, is Sagittarius blessing or curse? Is it light or shadow? Is it freedom or destruction? The answer is yes, all of this, at the same time. And the only way to truly understand the Sagittarius is to accept there'll never be just one thing. Will never be simple. Will never be easy to categorize. They're complex, contradictory, impossible to control. And perhaps that's exactly what makes them unforgettable. Because in the end, we all have a bit of Sagittarius inside us. That part that wants to fly, that wants to be free, that wants to truly live instead of just exist. The difference is that Sagittarius has the courage to follow this calling, even knowing they might fall, even knowing they might fail, even knowing they might get lost. They shoot the arrow, always shoot, because they know the only thing worse than missing the target is never having the courage to shoot. And this is the archer's final face, not perfection, not absolute wisdom, not total enlightenment, but the raw courage to live authentically, to be who they really are, to move forward even when everything seems uncertain. Each arrow shot is an act of faith. Each step toward the horizon is a declaration that life is worth it. Each mistake is a lesson. Each hit is a victory. And in the end, when all is said and done, Sagittarius reminds us that life isn't about reaching some final destination. It's about the journey, about movement, about the eternal search for something that gives meaning to our ephemeral existence. This is Sagittarius, blessing and curse, light and shadow, freedom and responsibility, all at the same time, always. And you, what did you think of this journey through Sagittarius's two faces? Have you lived with a Sagittarian and recognized these patterns? Have you felt on your skin that flame that warms and the fire that burns? Or maybe you are Sagittarius and are finally understanding why you live on this emotional roller coaster. Leave your experience here in the comments. Tell us, which face of Sagittarius do you most recognize in someone you know? The inspiring light or the unpredictable shadow? And if you're Sagittarian, be honest. Have you seen yourself in this mirror? Have you recognized your own escape patterns, disguised as freedom? Have you noticed when your honesty turned into a weapon instead of medicine? We need to know. The comments here always generate incredible discussions, and everyone learns more about this fascinating sign. And if this video helped you understand Sagittarius in a completely new way, if you finally managed to decipher that impossible person in your life, or if you simply enjoyed this deep analysis, leave that like, because this helps a lot for the channel to continue bringing content like this. Detailed, honest, no beating around the bush. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? We dive deep into each sign, revealing not just the superficial characteristics everyone knows, but the truths no one has the courage to speak. Hit that red subscribe button and activate notification bell, because every week there's a new video exploring the mysteries of the Zodiac in a way you've never seen before. Which sign do you want to see next? Which duality do you want us to unveil in the next video? Leave your suggestion in the comments, and rest assured we read all of them. Your opinion matters and directly influences the content we create. And share this video with that Sagittarian friend who urgently needs to understand why they act the way they do. Or with that person trying to decipher a Sagittarius and just can't. This content was made for this, to generate understanding, to create clarity where before there was only confusion, to show that understanding both faces isn't about judging, but accepting human complexity. In the end, Sagittarius teaches us the most important lesson of all. Life isn't about choosing between light and shadow, but learning to walk with both, knowing that each arrow shot is a step toward infinity. And you? Are you ready to shoot your own arrow? See you in the next video. And remember, the sky isn't the limit when you're the archer who aims beyond the stars. See you later.